Good morning, I'm Lisa Garber, and this is Law News. I am fortunate enough to be joined here today with Adam Sostrin. He's a criminal defense attorney out of California.
Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, it's been
Nice
fantastic
to
to be here. It's been a long time since I've been with the LawNewz people, so I'm excited to be part of this.
We're glad to have you, and this is a huge trial to be talking about right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were just listening. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's the biggest search in Tennessee history, so it's no wonder that this is an issue we got to talk about. This is an important case.
Exactly. Hugely expensive, hugely exhaustive search, and now 6 years later, finally coming to fruition and trying to figure out what the jury's going to say. And that's where I really want to get your perspective here. We've been listening to some clips from the ex-girlfriend. She's been speaking about some reporting she did back and forth with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And so I really want your perspective as a criminal defense lawyer. How do you think the jury's going to respond to these key witnesses who are really kind of calling on each other and trying to corroborate this story?
I mean, are we talking about corroborating the story from the perspective of the defense or the prosecution? Where are we going here?
From the prosecution.
Well, I mean, it sort of fits, right? I mean, there's the statement that they allegedly see, Zachary, the person wearing camouflage at the scene, right prior to the disappearance. There's the friend that goes out to dinner with them. That also sees in the distance Zachary wearing the same camouflage outfit and gives a description to the police about that. So there's plenty of corroborating facts with respect to the prosecution's case. It seems to gel pretty well.
And what do you make of how the prosecution has been forming these arguments, especially because, you have these witnesses, especially Autry, who are giving up, they're saying, I'm not going to be held guilty. I'm not going to be facing the death penalty now. And to be honest, a lot of these witnesses have been characterized as they're drug users, they're fast talkers. And so what do you make of that?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately for the defense, the prosecution has to work with what they have. It seems to have a group of people that are heavily involved in morphine and methamphetamine, and not a good group of people to hang out with on a Sunday, I guess. But that's what they have, and it's always the case that prosecution witnesses are going to be calling people. It's always the case that prosecution witnesses are going to be calling people and giving people immunity when they have to for these types of important cases. The heavier the charge, the fact that somebody's got a drug issue, well, that's just something that happens. That's something that's life, that's what's going on, and that's clearly this group of people here that I wouldn't be hanging out with.
Right, but then how do you think, and I'm going to flip to a clip of Jason Autry when he was testifying, just to point out how this first began, but how do you think that's going to affect the jurors and his credibility at this point?
Well, I mean, of course the jurors are going to take into consideration the fact that, this is the person who's using drugs, this is a person who's promised some sort of leniency with respect to their testimony, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, you do have that friend that goes on that double date. And she identifies, the person, the creepy person in camouflage who's in the background, which corroborates, him being present with the victim prior to her ever being seen again. The fact that he uses drugs can't detract from that. And there is the one bullet hole,
Sure.
in the skull. And then Autry testifies that there's one gunshot. It sounded like there were multiple, but that was just the sound in the environment at that time. I think the prosecution has a lot of facts going its way in this case. No doubt about it.
Wow. And then, so you're talking about the facts that are going its way. I think definitely the stories are helpful. I'm very curious. You brought up the gun, and now I want to talk about the gun. So the gun that was found. The gun that was found more recently, and no DNA evidence, there's really no extremely hard evidence in this case. Fine, we're dealing with people that are on meth, they're potentially on other drugs. These are people that, as you said, probably not the greatest double date. But at this point, when you're trying to find some hard evidence, what do you think of that gun issue? No DNA evidence, things like that.
Well, it's clear that there's no DNA evidence, but we have that's been established. But then you have an informant at the jail who states that they're not going to find the gun. It's just often the case that you don't have DNA these kinds of things, and it has to do with the statements that are made. And it seems to be that there's enough statements that are going to get the jury over that hurdle. The fact that they don't have that technical evidence, of DNA with respect to a match, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to find beyond a reasonable doubt that there wasn't a killing in this case, a murder.
Sure. And so just on that, I would like to flip to a clip of Autry's testimony, and he's talking about Zach's demeanor and a little bit of drug use and some issues that he saw when Holly's name came up. So we're going to flip to that, and then I'd like to continue the discussion with you.
I look back around, Mr. Adams was standing.
Let me stop. You said you looked around. Did you stay down there at the corner, or did you come back?
I stayed right here working back and forth, watching.
What about looking the other way?
There was nothing coming. I looked back this way, and I told him there was nothing coming.
When did you look back the other way? The way that you came in on?
Just shortly after I noticed that I looked down here and wasn't nothing coming.
Okay. You can do the lights. Hang on. All right. You can keep going.
I looked around, and I told him that there was nothing coming, the coast was clear, something to that effect. And at that time, boom, the gun sounded, the gun went off. And it sounded like to me that it shot 3 or 4 times underneath that bridge. I had done made it back. I had done started my way back this way. And it sounded like boom, boom, boom underneath that bridge. It was just one shot, but it echoed underneath that bridge all the way down that damn river bottom. And when that gun went off, there was Martins went everywhere. Martins, bridge, birds went everywhere. Just all up under that bridge. And it just dead silence for just a second. I was still in this general location right here. And I heard a boat crank up, a boat running somewhere in either here or over here, somewhere there was a boat. Either down the Tennessee River was right here. And I took off running, run back over to the truck, and I told him, I said, God damn, we have been seen or heard. And at that time, Mr. Adams grabs the feet, and I grabbed the same spot at the upper torso. The blood spot was probably the size of a grapefruit at that time. We load the body back into the truck in the same fashion, shut the tailgate, and tear out of there like wild Indians, just driving a racket. And I told him, I said, this is a federal refuge. There's no firearms supposed to be allowed down here. If they see us driving like this, we're going to be the suspects. So we slowed down.
Now, are those the exact words you used? Did you say it that calmly? This is the federal refuge, we will be suspects?
Of course not. I mean, that's...
So we've gotten to hear a little bit more of Mr. Autry's testimony and how he appears, and I am here with Adam. He's criminal defense attorney, and Adam Sostrin joining us from California. Thank you so much. And thank you. So we were discussing in the background a little bit how Autry, I don't want to steal your phrase, but we're going to talk a little bit about how he plays into this situation and how he is really working alongside the story to try to take the testimony and really put together the entire story, figure out what happened.
Right. Well, Autry seems to know all the key facts that led up to it. With respect to his role, respect to dumping the body, with respect to hearing that she's alive, him looking the other way, the gunshot going off. Based on his testimony, it's clear that there's premeditation with respect to the defendant Zachary in this matter. So, as we said earlier off camera, his testimony is really the golden nugget. I don't know why I said that. It's a stupid term for the prosecution, but he really is everything to their case.
Yes, exactly. So now that we're waiting on this jury.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a case like this? And I know the scale is a little different and this has garnered national attention, but looking where, it's really all hinging on this, as you said, golden nugget witness and this man who unfortunately may not be the best evidence for either the prosecution or the defense at this point because he may not be extremely believable. But have you ever seen a case where it's hinged on just these words and there's so little solid evidence? And I keep going back to this because there was the issue with the gun, there was the issue with the lack of DNA, and everybody coming together at this point. What do you make of this? Have you ever seen anything like it?
Well, all it really takes, the prosecution can call as many witnesses or as little witnesses as it would like to in a case. And with his testimony and, the defense testimony with respect to, and I've had many cases with respect cell phones and cell phone towers and
yes.
and where one is located, another's located based on the cell phone, but who was holding the cell phone at the time? The evidence seems a little thin, and then the initial investigation that went out there that spoke with the sex abuser who admitted some involvement with respect to a freeway. It just doesn't gel with respect to where the body's found in this case. Where she's last seen, however far that is. I think that in this case, the defense has a really high hurdle. They've already given their closing argument, but I think it's certainly an uphill battle, and they were probably left with the cards that they had. And I think the judge, unfortunately, perhaps he wasn't helpful with respect to some of the evidentiary issues. And I have evidentiary issues in every single trial I'm in. Sometimes I just want to impeach a witness and the whole day trying to do it, and the judge doesn't let me do a darn thing. And then it's not until the next day that she's like, okay, I'll give Mr. Sostrin a shot. These things are always frustrating for the defense, but I think the likely outcome in this case is a conviction.
Okay. And hearing you say that, if you were the defense counsel in this case, something we were talking about a little bit earlier, and I'm not sure if you recall because it was really a small portion, but when Caroline was on earlier with some of her guests, they were talking about the role of Holly Bobo's brother, Clint. And that suspicious phone call that he made that morning when he saw his sister go off into the woods with a man wearing camouflage, really thinking, he said allegedly, that it was her boyfriend, then being told by his mom, no, it wasn't, call the police. How do you make, if you're in the defense counsel seat, do you do anything with that? Do you try to theorize what happened there? What do you do with that information? Well,
there's always going to be, no case is ever perfect, right? There's always going to be sort of inherent flaws in the statements that are given. So of course, I would want to jump on that in every which possible way I could. But like I said, at the end of the day, when you have so much evidence, you can bite at some of the inconsistencies. It's really hard to get over some of the hurdles, especially in this case.
And when
that's my humble opinion.
Sure. And when you talk about hurdles, obviously this is a tricky case to defend. The reason I ask about Clint is because we actually had testimony from Jason Autry saying, well, we were actually teaching Clint how to make meth. We were teaching him how to manufacture meth. So if you see that there's a potential for that kind of relationship there, and Jason Autry himself is saying that, does that play into it at all? Especially because it does look a little suspicious that he's let his sister wander off into the woods.
It's understandable. He saw that, but he's a person who's involved in methamphetamine. So a person who's involved in methamphetamine can do any and all things. I think that would be the prosecutor's response. They're not going to react normally to certain situations. So I still don't think that's enough. I would like to say, that there's a great winning argument for the defense. There's a slam dunk. There's something that they have. They just sort of have to jump at the little things and get really excited, about the cell phone expert, right?
I think this is the first time anybody has been excited about a cell phone expert here on
Right.
LawNewz.
I'm never excited when I go to Verizon, but we're going to be excited in this case.
Sure. And can you talk a little bit more about that? I would love to hear it. My background is in cybersecurity law, and so I love when the forensics expert comes on the scene to talk about it. What do you think about that question? I mean, we have people saying, well, it doesn't matter if cell phone was there, it doesn't mean the person was there. How would you use that in your defense to poke holes?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I would do. And they said with respect to the timing of the incident, that, they weren't anywhere near each other when it occurred. The prosecution's response is so easy. And it's sort of a thing of like modern cases where it's so often that we want to get the cell phone tower records, not like the old store tower records, but we have to get these records to find out where people are located, especially in these higher end trials where the consequences are so great. No matter what you're doing, it may be not in a misdemeanor, but in some serious felonies, you're doing it. You have to make the most out of these. You probably want witnesses to say, the guy was never without his cell phone. Things like that are the types of things that you have to show or that you want to bring up in these cases that involve cell phone towers. So, I mean, I've seen it before, but when you have to just rely on the tower, it just hurts as a defense attorney to have to deal with that. But their job is to make sure the prosecution gets challenged every way, that they don't bring defendants to trial for nothing. And here we are, and who knows when the jurors come out with a verdict. It could be very soon.
Well, I think actually then we're going to have to go back to some cell phone testimony, and I think we're going to flip to ZA 93. We're going to be hearing from a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation agent talking about pinging the cell phone towers, those kinds of issues. Before we flip into that, is there anything you'd like to add on how the defense really closed out this case and potentially what they could have done better, your position as a criminal defense lawyer?
Well, I think they probably could have hit at some of the inconsistencies a little bit more, but the defense attorney did test. I think her closing statement was about an hour and 50 minutes or something like that, so I think she believed that she had everything covered. Again, she had to sort of work with what she had. The biggest part, perhaps there should have been maybe even more emphasis on it.
So kind. That's so kind. But you still think he's going to get a conviction in this case?
I would assume that there's going to be a conviction in this case. And if I'm wrong, but don't call me back, right? Or call me anyway.
It's tough. Okay. I think you're exactly right. I think in this case, and we've all been kind of hitting on the defense counsel right now, because really not, as we're seeing, you talk about the cell phone evidence, you talk about alternative theories, and the amount of holes that they poked, I think they really could have done a better job, something a little bit more in depth. And I completely agree with you. I think we probably will see a conviction. Just depends on when.
Right. Just depends on when. Yeah. We're waiting.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts before we hear some riveting cell phone testimony?
Any closing thoughts? Jury trials are exciting. I always feel for the jurors that have to sit there for weeks on end and
Thank you very much, Adam. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Pleasure being on.
Thank you.